Well, kind of doing a evening walk and a little garden walk and talk. Figured I'd do a walk and talk. Look at some of these Chickasaw plum suckers coming off for the fall. I can dig those up, pot those up if I so wish. I'm taking a look here at this rose bush that I have to trim already. So much growth so fast. And I was thinking about a topic. I'm going to post 2 walk and talks at the same time because the topic is that's on my mind is a big topic, I guess. I guess I had a lot to say. But it's basically permanence in permaculture, if I have to give it a title. But, back to that topic, I was just thinking about, what is it that actually makes something permanent? At least what do I define as permanent when you're in this situation? When you're talking about nature, to me, that's going to be rebirth, self-seeding. If you're growing something that can't seed, or maybe it can't grow, like the seeds can't sprout, it can't complete its life cycle without a human involved, that may not be, quite the permanence you're going for. Maybe it is. But for what I'm doing here, I think I may have mentioned this before, if it can't reproduce itself, then I'm not really all that interested. One of the promises of permaculture is lower maintenance in the future after you put up a larger upfront labor to get it established. So if I'm going to do that, that is something I'm going to be looking for. Whatever I grow needs to be able to propagate itself with very little, very, very minimal intervention. And when I first started doing all of this, I got into this because I wanted to actually go to school for ecological restoration. And I've always been drawn to the concept of returning something to its original pristine state. I don't know why that appeals to me so much, but it's a pretty sexy thought to me. So when I bought my own little slice of land, that's what I chose to do with it, was to try to put it back as pristine as possible, pre-European, so to speak. And I guess, I didn't know it at the time, but that was like my first steps into permaculture. Permaculture does draw a lot of principles from, what was that, Virginia creeper. Sorry, I'm going to take a tangent. Yeah, right there, Virginia creeper. I don't believe that there's any edible use to that, but still nice to see it growing in the drought. It usually typically needs a little bit more water, but it comes back year over year. What was I saying? Oh yeah, rewilding. Ecological restoration. Yeah, permaculture draws from that. A lot of principles from that. If you think about it, it makes total sense. What is the goal of ecological restoration? To get the environment restored to where it doesn't need our intervention. Now, I probably have mentioned this several times. We're going to have to intervene for the invasive species, but anyway, rewilding. Like I said, I didn't know it at the time, but that's if you study rewilding, I think that's a great way to get started in permaculture, is to not really study permaculture, but look at how you would restore a native environment in your yard or on your land. And that'd be a great way to first start learning the principles. I think you should start there, actually. And study the principles of ecological restoration, how to do it, learn your natives, learn your local ecosystem. I mentioned a planting calendar, using your zone 5 space as a planting calendar. But and how the plants that grow can tell you what's going on in your soil in terms of fertility and nutrients. But also just learning when you like, say you're doing a rewilding project, you're learning your plant families that are native to the area and all the species that grow there. By learning that, it'll help you learn what families, when you're growing non-native crops, when you expand to your zone 432 space zone of use in your permaculture garden or farm, it'll help tell you what families of crops to stick with. For instance, Brassicas grow, there's a lot of brassica species here, probably everywhere, but looking at the types of brassicas that grow here, it helped me pick varieties of mustard greens and other brassicas. And I did have some limited success with self-seeding with those more domesticated varieties. And it will help me seek out maybe, uncommon crops that have the characteristics of the brassicas here. So that's a huge value in having some kind of, understanding the native environment, understanding the ecosystem enough to where you could come in and rewild it if you had to. Another little side benefit is you're going to learn those plant families, and that'll inform you for your domestic crops or any other alternative species you want to bring in that are edible. Now, I guess this all came about because I've done a lot of reading on this before I got started to understand what was edible. I had to read a lot about the Native Americans in the area, pre-European contact, to learn what their diets were, because there really isn't a lot of information when you're talking about native edibles, at least in my ecoregion, the cross timbers for sure. It's out there, but you got to dig for it. And some of it is, unknown edibility, and the only information we have that says it is edible is from these written accounts from the first European explorers coming through the area, noting what the Native Americans were eating. And I don't think there's a lot more scientific data on whether or not it's edible. So, but it's a source that I read about, and you pick up a little bit of side knowledge, little bit of side information, like how they lived and what their diets were, and their cultures, and really fascinating stuff. And I think it's probably worth reading if you're trying to begin a permaculture endeavor, is to learn what did people live off of before they were our modern society kicked in the area. Why do I think that's important? Well, because usually those folks are living off what the land can support, and I think that's very much so a permaculture principle, to make the most use of the resources that are available for your specific situation. The rainfall, the local native environment, and those people, they learned how to live in symbiosis with their environment. If you look at the people that lived in California, the indigenous folks in California, there was like over 500 tribes, all hunter and gatherer tribes, but all living in complete balance with their environment. And living a sedentary lifestyle as well, because the environment, the ecosystem just supports that. I think I mentioned that in the first video about some environments, the promise of permaculture is going to be a lot easier. So if you come to this part of Texas, to the cross timbers, the Native Americans in this area, I believe it's the Wichita, they, and I hope I'm not wrong on that, but they lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle with some farming. It's like a mix. So why would they live that way? They just like it? Maybe to some level, some did. But usually it was just out of practicality. What it takes to survive is usually just what's practical and what's easy, and the least amount of calories spent for the most calories gained. So why were they hunting? Is because this area it didn't produce enough in their farming methods that they were using for them to completely feed themselves, generally speaking. Or it could have been that the game was just so abundant that they just didn't have to put in the energy that it takes to farm to feed themselves. So that that's, anytime you see something like that, if you're living in an area where the native peoples did a lot of hunting and gathering because they didn't really have to, because it was so abundant, you're probably living in an area where it's going to be very easy to do permaculture. But if you're living, say, in West Texas, where the environment, prior to European contact at least, just crossing it on foot, it could be a death sentence. It's very difficult to cross. It was almost a geologic barrier. Doing permaculture out there is going to be, because there's simply less resources that you have on the land without maybe digging a well or something. And I don't know what the permaculture stance is on a well, but I'm pretty sure that the stance is you should try to make use of all the available water you can before digging a well. And that's true for all resources. Before you go to any extreme like that to try to get at a resource that you need to try to find a way to get it that's more friendly. And I know wells aren't completely unfriendly, but we do want to try to use as little water out of our water table as we can, I would imagine. But yeah, those are some thoughts. You know, just an evening walk and talk. Figured I would chime in because I said I would revisit this permanence in permaculture and whether or not it's important and how to arrive at it. And I think taking lessons from the native peoples and understanding your ecosystem, I just can't be emphasized enough. So hopefully you found it somewhat useful to listen to me ramble on. Thanks, guys.